What's the biggest lie society keeps telling us? Story 1. That the law applies to everyone. That's the promise we're raised on. Equal justice, blindfolded scales, no favorites. The idea is simple and powerful. The rules don't care who you are. Rich or poor, famous or anonymous, connected or alone, the law is supposed to land the same way. It's one of the pillars of modern society, and it's repeated so often that it feels unquestionable. But outcomes often follow resources. The ability to hire elite legal teams, drag out court battles, negotiate settlements, or navigate regulatory gray areas changes the equation. For a large corporation, a fine can be a cost of doing business. For an ordinary person, a fine can mean eviction, bankruptcy, or long-term financial damage. Bail systems disproportionately affect those without cash on hand. Civil lawsuits can be weaponized by those who can afford to litigate endlessly. Even when laws are written neutrally, enforcement and access to defense are not evenly distributed. This doesn't mean laws are meaningless or that justice never works. It means the playing field isn't level. The framework promises equality, but leverage shapes reality. Influence, money, and status often determine how aggressively rules are enforced, and how survivable the consequences are. On paper, the law is universal. In practice, your position in the system often determines how heavy it feels when it lands. Story 2. You're free. It's one of the most powerful stories society tells. Free to speak, free to vote, free to move, free to choose your career, your beliefs, your identity. Legally, in many ways, that's true. Civil liberties matter. Protections matter. The ability to criticize leadership without disappearing in the night matters. But practical freedom isn't just about what's legal. It's about what's possible. If missing 2 paychecks means losing your home, how free are you to leave a toxic job? If healthcare is tied to employment, how freely can you walk away? If debt dictates your career choices for decades, how flexible are your options? If algorithms shape what you see, buy, and believe, how independent are your decisions? Constraints don't have to be chains to be real. They can be economic, structural, informational. You're free often means you're free within boundaries. Boundaries set by markets, by systems, by circumstance. Legal liberty and lived autonomy are not identical. One is written in law, the other is shaped by resources, stability, and access. Freedom isn't binary, it's layered. And for many people, it exists more on paper than in daily life. Story 3. If you're good at something, you'll love doing it forever. That sounds motivating. Until burnout walks in. Being good at something often means you get asked to do it constantly. You become the reliable one, the high performer, the go-to person. What starts as passion slowly turns into expectation, then obligation, then pressure. Competence attracts demand. Demand, without boundaries, erodes enjoyment. Psychologically, passion thrives on autonomy and challenge. When something becomes repetitive, high stakes, or tied entirely to income and performance metrics, the intrinsic reward can shrink. You stop doing it because you love it. You do it because you have to. Over time, even the thing you once cared about can feel draining. Burnout isn't about weakness. It's about chronic stress, lack of recovery, and misalignment between effort and reward. You can be talented and exhausted at the same time. Being good at something increases opportunity. It doesn't guarantee lifelong joy. Sometimes the thing you're best at is the thing you need the strongest boundaries around. Story 4. The US can't afford socialized healthcare. That line gets repeated like it's a hard mathematical fact, but the US already spends more per capita on healthcare than any other developed nation. Not slightly more, significantly more. Total national health expenditures are in the trillions annually. The question isn't whether money exists in the system, it's how it's structured and where it flows. Other high-income countries with universal systems spend less per person while covering everyone. They negotiate drug prices centrally, reduce administrative overhead, and operate with different reimbursement models. Meanwhile, the US system includes private insurers, employer-based coverage, Medicare, Medicaid, administrative layers, billing complexity, and profit margins, all adding cost. Saying we can't afford it assumes adding universal coverage means adding entirely new spending on top of what already exists. In reality, proposals usually involve reallocating existing spending through taxes, premiums, and cost restructuring. That doesn't mean implementation would be simple. It would be politically disruptive, economically complex, and massively transitional. But unaffordable, the US already pays the highest total bill in the world. The debate isn't about whether the country spends enough money, it's about how and who pays it. Story 5. Billionaires create jobs. That line gets thrown around like it's an economic law of nature, as if wealth at the top automatically trickles down into opportunity for everyone else. Yes, large companies hire people. Yes, entrepreneurs can build businesses that employ thousands. But jobs aren't created out of generosity. They're created when there's demand. When consumers buy products and services, companies expand to meet that demand. The revenue supports payroll. It's the market that creates jobs. Billionaires allocate capital. There's a difference. If a billionaire invests in expansion, hiring can increase. If they invest in automation, outsourcing, or stock buybacks, payroll may shrink while profits rise. Wealth concentration doesn't inherently guarantee broad employment growth. It depends on incentives, policy, and economic conditions. Small and medium-sized businesses collectively employ a huge share of workers. Public sector jobs employ millions. Consumer spending drives much of the economy. The idea that prosperity depends on a handful of ultra-wealthy individuals creating work oversimplifies a complex system. Capital matters, but so do labor, demand, infrastructure, and policy. Jobs don't exist because someone is rich. They exist because an economy needs work done, and someone is willing to pay for it. Story 6. That if you follow the rules and play fair, you win. That might be the cleanest lie ever sold. We're taught the formula early. Work hard, be honest, don't cut corners, treat people right, and the system will reward you. Merit plus integrity equals success. It's comforting. It's also not guaranteed. Plenty of people follow every rule and still lose. They get laid off, they get passed over, they get underpaid, they lose out to someone louder, better connected, more ruthless, or simply luckier. Meanwhile, some people bend rules, exploit loopholes, or leverage insider access, and move ahead faster. Fairness isn't the same thing as outcomes. Systems are influenced by power, timing, incentives, and randomness. Playing fair protects your character. It doesn't control the board. That doesn't mean integrity is pointless. It means integrity is a choice about who you are, not a contract guaranteeing reward. The lie wasn't rules matter. It was the promise that fairness ensures victory. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And that gap is where a lot of people wake up. Story 7. You can make your own choices. No one will judge you. That's one of the softer lies. We're told to be authentic, to live our truth, to follow our path without worrying about what anyone thinks. And in theory, yes, you're free to choose your career, your partner, your lifestyle, your beliefs. But society always judges. Quietly, loudly, subtly, publicly. Choose a low-paying passion over a stable career? People question your responsibility. Choose money over passion? They question your soul. Don't have kids? You're selfish. Have too many kids? You're irresponsible. Stay single? Something must be wrong. Get divorced? You failed. Every path carries commentary. Humans are social creatures. Judgment is part of how communities enforce norms. It's how cultures maintain boundaries. The idea that you can live entirely free from evaluation isn't realistic. You can make your own choices, but they exist inside a social environment that reacts to them. The real lesson isn't no one will judge you. It's learning whose judgment actually matters and whose doesn't. Story 8. Capitalism is the best system for the majority of people. That's often presented as settled truth. Capitalism has undeniably driven innovation, productivity, and enormous wealth creation. Markets can allocate resources efficiently. Competition can push improvement. Incentives can spark risk-taking and invention. Many modern conveniences exist because profit motives rewarded their creation. But best for the majority depends on how the system is structured. Unregulated capitalism tends to concentrate wealth over time. Capital accumulates. Those with assets gain leverage. Those without assets rely on wages, which don't always grow at the same rate as returns on capital. Without guardrails, labor protections, antitrust enforcement, social safety nets, inequality can widen significantly. Historically, the most stable and broadly prosperous economies haven't been pure laissez-faire systems. They've blended markets with regulation, public infrastructure, and redistribution mechanisms. The debate isn't capitalism versus nothing. It's what version, with what constraints, serving whom. Capitalism can generate abundance. It doesn't automatically distribute it. Whether it's best for the majority depends less on the label and more on the policies shaping it. Story 9. Money doesn't buy happiness. That phrase usually comes from a place of comfort, because when your bills are paid, it's easy to philosophize about fulfillment. But when you're choosing between rent and groceries, happiness isn't abstract. It's stable. It's a breathing room. It's not waking up at 3 a.m. doing math in your head. It's not feeling your stomach drop every time your phone buzzes, because it might be another overdue notice. Chronic financial stress isn't just inconvenient, it's corrosive. It raises cortisol. It disrupts sleep. It fuels anxiety and depression. It makes long-term thinking almost impossible, because survival becomes the priority. Money, at that level, absolutely buys happiness. It buys safety, it buys options, it buys time, it buys the absence of constant fear. Where the phrase starts to become true is after security is established. Once your needs are consistently met, Once you're not drowning, more money doesn't automatically create purpose, love, or inner peace. But for anyone who has felt like they're bailing water out of a sinking ship with a cup, money isn't luxury, it's oxygen. And oxygen feels a lot like happiness when you've been underwater. Story 10. Don't worry, you'll find someone soon. It's meant to be comforting. It can feel dismissive. Loneliness isn't solved by a timeline. Telling someone soon assumes the universe runs on a schedule. It doesn't. Relationships aren't distributed evenly. Some people meet partners early, some later, some not at all. There isn't a cosmic cue moving in order. What makes that phrase sting is the implication that being single is a temporary problem waiting to be fixed. As if your current state is incomplete, as if partnership is the default destination and you're just delayed. It also ignores reality. Modern dating is fragmented. People move more, work more. Social circles shrink. Apps expand options but dilute connection. Timing matters. Geography matters. Emotional readiness matters. And sometimes, despite doing everything right, it just hasn't happened yet. Hope is good. False certainty isn't. You'll find someone is a promise no one can guarantee. A better truth? Connection is possible. But it isn't owed, scheduled, or evenly distributed. And your worth isn't suspended until it arrives. Story 11. That you need to have everything figured out by a certain age. Career by 25. Marriage by 30. House by 35. Kids before it's too late. It's like there's an invisible checklist floating over everyone's head, and if you don't hit the milestones on time, you're behind. Behind who? Life isn't standardized. People pivot careers in their 40s, start businesses in their 50s, go back to school in their 30s, meet partners later than they expected, change beliefs, change cities, change entire identities. The timeline you were handed was built around a different economy, a different housing market, a different cost of living, a different world. The pressure mostly comes from comparison. Social media compresses everyone's highlight reels into one scrolling feed. Engagements, promotions, babies, home purchase. It creates the illusion that everyone else is progressing smoothly and you're the only one improvising. But most people are improvising, quietly. There is no universal clock ticking toward you should have it all together by now. There's growth, there's adjustment, there's trial and error. Figuring things out isn't a deadline. It's a lifelong process, and almost no one has it as mapped out as they pretend. Story 12. That public transportation is for the weak. Somewhere along the way, owning a car became equated with independence, status, and success. Trains and buses got framed as fallback options. If you made it, you drove. But that narrative ignores reality. In many of the world's wealthiest, most efficient cities, public transportation is the backbone of daily life. CEOs ride trains. Professionals commute by metro. Students, families, retirees, everyone uses the same system because it's fast, reliable, and practical. Driving isn't freedom if you're stuck in traffic for 2 hours a day. It's not status if you're spending thousands a year on payments, insurance, gas, maintenance, and parking. It's not strength if you're forced into it because infrastructure gives you no alternative. Good public transit increases economic mobility. It reduces congestion. It lowers emissions. It connects people to jobs and services without requiring a 5-figure asset. Calling it for the weak confuses cultural pride with infrastructure design. Transportation is about efficiency, not ego. In places where public transit works well, using it isn't a sign you couldn't afford better. It's a sign the system actually works. Story 13. You get what you deserve. That one sounds moral. It sounds tidy. It's also one of the most comforting lies we tell ourselves. Because if outcomes always matched merit, then the world would feel fair. Good people would prosper. Hard workers would rise. The dishonest would fall. The cruel would pay. The generous would be rewarded. But reality doesn't sort itself that neatly. Good people get sick. Honest people get laid off. Talented people get overlooked. Corrupt people thrive. Lucky people stumble into opportunity. Timing and randomness play larger roles than we like to admit. The phrase also quietly blames people for their misfortune. If someone is struggling, the implication becomes that they somehow earned it. That's easier than confronting complexity, systemic issues, bad luck, unequal starting points, unpredictable events. Does effort matter? Of course. Do choices have consequences? Absolutely. But outcomes are influenced by more than morality or merit. You get what you deserve makes the world feel just. The truth is messier. Sometimes people get what they worked for. Sometimes they get what they don't, and sometimes they get neither. Story 14. Your elected officials will keep your best interests at heart while serving the people. That's the civic fairy tale. Campaigns are framed around service. Public office is described as sacrifice. The rhetoric is always about the people, hardworking families, future generations. And sometimes individuals genuinely believe they're doing the right thing. But incentives shape behavior more than slogans do. Elected officials answer to donors, party leadership, lobbyists, re-election cycles, and media pressure. Fundraising never stops. Poll numbers matter. Party alignment affects committee assignments and political survival. Major legislation is often negotiated in rooms most voters never see. Even well-intentioned representatives operate inside a system where compromise is currency and influence has layers. That doesn't mean every official is corrupt. It means the structure rewards power retention as much as public service. The promise is simple: they work for you. The reality is more complex. They work within a web of interests, some not. Representation exists. Pure alignment rarely does. Story 15. That hustle culture is normal, necessary. Work 60 hours, side gig after your main job. Answer emails at 10 p.m., sleep less. Grind now, live later. It's framed as ambition. It often functions as survival. In many countries, full-time work doesn't routinely mean 50 to 70-hour weeks just to stay afloat. Paid leave is standard. Healthcare isn't tied to employment. Overtime isn't glorified as personality. The baseline expectation is closer to balance. But hustle culture reframes overwork as virtue. If you're exhausted, you're dedicated. If you're burned out, you're ambitious. If you're constantly busy, you're valuable. The line between drive and self-exploitation blurs. The reality is that productivity has increased massively over the past decades, but compensation and working expectations haven't scaled in a way that consistently benefits workers. So people compensate by stacking hours instead of gaining margin. There's nothing wrong with working hard. There is something wrong with normalizing chronic exhaustion as the cost of basic stability. Rest isn't laziness, balance isn't weakness, and survival shouldn't require permanent overdrive. Story 16. That money is real, not in the way we think it is. It feels solid, concrete, objective, like it exists the way a rock exists. But modern money isn't backed by gold sitting in a vault. It's not intrinsically valuable paper. It's a shared agreement, a ledger entry, a number in a database that everyone agrees represents value. Most money today is digital. It's not even printed. It's created through credit, loans, and banking systems. When a bank issues a loan, new money effectively comes into existence as an entry on a balance sheet. When debt is repaid, that money disappears from circulation. Currencies have value because governments declare them legal tender and because people collectively trust they'll be accepted in exchange for goods and services. If confidence collapses, value collapses. Money is a tool, a measuring stick, a claim on resources. It coordinates labor and trade across massive populations. But it's not tangible wealth in itself. Food is real, shelter is real, energy is real, skills are real. Money is the agreed upon symbol that lets us trade those things. It feels permanent. It's actually collective belief codified. Story 17, that retirement is the best time of your life. That's the postcard version. No alarm clock, no meetings, no deadlines. Travel, hobbies, relaxation. The reward for decades of effort. And for some people, it really is freeing. But for others, retirement isn't automatically bliss. Work doesn't just provide income. It provides structure, identity, social interaction, purpose. When that disappears overnight, some people feel untethered. Days blur. Isolation creeps in. Without intentional planning, the freedom can feel empty instead of fulfilling. There's also the financial side. If savings are tight, retirement can become a constant budgeting exercise instead of a golden era. Health changes can limit mobility or independence. The idea of someday everything will be perfect doesn't always survive reality. The bigger issue is the framing. If you postpone joy, relationships, hobbies, and rest for 40 years waiting for retirement to finally live, you're gambling that time and health will cooperate. Retirement can be great, but it isn't automatically the peak. It's just another phase. And like every phase, it depends less on the calendar and more on how you built your life before it. Story 18. Looks don't matter. That's one of those polite lies society likes to repeat. Appearance absolutely influences how people are treated. There's a well-documented halo effect, where people perceived as attractive are also perceived as more competent, trustworthy, and capable, even without evidence. Studies have shown differences in hiring decisions, salary outcomes, courtroom judgments, and even school evaluations based partly on physical presentation. It's uncomfortable to admit because it clashes with our fairness narrative. But humans are visual creatures. First impressions form fast. Grooming, posture, facial symmetry, fitness, clothing. They all send signals whether we consciously approve of that or not. That doesn't mean looks are everything. They're not. Long-term success depends on skills, consistency, personality, and value creation. Attraction and perception can open doors, but they don't guarantee staying power. The real distortion is pretending appearance plays no role at all. It does. Social psychology has demonstrated that repeatedly. The healthier truth might be this: looks matter in first impressions. Character, competence, and behavior matter over time. Denying the first part doesn't make it disappear. Story 19. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It sounds wholesome, encouraging, supportive, but it ignores reality. In theory, asking for help shows vulnerability and strength. In practice, it can change how people see you. At work, it can signal incompetence if the culture rewards independence. In competitive environments, it can be remembered later. In personal relationships, it can shift dynamics if the support isn't reciprocated. Not everyone responds with empathy. Some people weaponize it, some judge it, some quietly downgrade their perception of you. That doesn't mean you should never ask. It means the advice is incomplete. The real skill isn't just asking for help. It's knowing who to ask, when to ask, how to ask, and whether the environment is safe for it. Support systems matter, but discernment matters too. Vulnerability is powerful. In the wrong one, it can cost you. Story 20. Everything happens for a reason. It's usually said at funerals. After layoffs, after breakups, after diagnosis, it's meant to comfort, but it can feel hollow. Not everything that happens has a deeper lesson attached to it. Sometimes bad things happen because of randomness, because of biology, because of someone else's mistake, because systems fail, because the timing was cruel. The phrase implies intention, like the universe is orchestrating events towards some grand design. That suffering is somehow purposeful. For someone in pain, that can feel minimized, as if they're supposed to extract wisdom immediately from something that just hurts. Meaning can come later. Growth can come later. Perspective can come later. But that doesn't mean the event itself was required, destined, or part of a master plan. Sometimes things happen because cause and effect is messy. Sometimes they happen because probability catches up. Everything happens for a reason, makes chaos feel organized. Reality isn't always organized. And not every scar comes with a cosmic explanation. Story 21. That any kind of division matters more than wealth. Politics, culture wars, red versus blue, race, religion, lifestyle. We're constantly told those lines are the ones that define everything, that those are the real battles shaping the world. Meanwhile, wealth concentrates. When attention is locked onto identity fights and outrage cycles, it rarely centers on asset ownership, capital flows, tax structures, or regulatory capture. Public energy gets spent arguing horizontally, citizen against citizen, instead of vertically, toward the structures that determine who controls land, corporations, media platforms, and financial systems. Division is powerful because it fragments collective leverage. If working and middle-class people see each other as enemies first, coordination becomes harder. Labor bargaining weakens. Policy pressure diffuses. Focus splinters. Emotional bandwidth gets consumed by cultural conflict instead of economic structure. That doesn't mean cultural issues are imaginary. They matter deeply to people's lived experiences. But wealth concentration shapes housing, healthcare access, political influence, media ownership, and opportunity at scale. Economic power quietly underpins many of the visible fights. The system doesn't need perfect unity to function. It just needs enough distraction. When people are busy fighting sideways, they're not looking up. And concentrated power tends to prefer it that way. Story 22. It's the lesser of two evils. That phrase shows up every election cycle like clockwork. It reframes choice as damage control. Not inspiration, not alignment, just mitigation. You're not voting for something, you're voting against something worse. Over time, that mindset changes the relationship between citizens and politics. Instead of demanding better candidates, better policy, or better systems, people brace themselves for compromise. Expectations shrink. Standards are lower, the bar becomes not catastrophic. It also creates a trap. If voters repeatedly accept the lesser evil, parties have less incentive to evolve. They know fear will consolidate support, polarization intensifies. Loyalty becomes defensive rather than aspirational. That doesn't mean choices are equal. Sometimes differences are significant. Sometimes one option truly carries fewer harmful consequences. But when the dominant framing is always pick your poison, it signals something deeper about the system's ability to produce leadership people actually believe in. Democracy ideally offers representation. When it consistently feels like harm reduction, people start questioning whether the menu was designed that way on purpose. Story 23. That society is telling us a lot of things. Sometimes it is true. A lot of times it is us making presumptions based on what we see and feel. We should be applying to ourselves based on the people we're observing or what people are presuming or should be cultural norms. Like a lot of people on social media are getting lip filler, but it doesn't mean it's a cultural norm or needs to be. Like because a lot of guys are on social media with six-packs doesn't mean I need abs to feel lovable. Because people have larger houses doesn't mean I'm bad for not or behind or unsuccessful. None of it matters, but we seem to make it matter. You can be more than you want if you stop doing what you believe are the expectations of others and realize you're the one imposing those expectations on yourself. Actions have consequences for sure. Some of these expectations can be good. Get a job. Don't accrue debt because money sounds fake. Contribute to society. Wear clothes and practice good hygiene when in public. Good things to live by. Some of these expectations can be really bad. If I don't have a job, I'm awful lazy mean. Not everyone has a job at all times. A good example of this is when you're older and you spend a whole day doing nothing but playing video games. But you feel guilty the whole day that you did so and didn't enjoy a single bit of it. It's not great if you do that every day and neglect all of your responsibilities. But it doesn't make you bad if you have a day like that because you feel you should be doing something else. Story 24. Honesty is the best policy. That's one of the first moral rules we're taught. Tell the truth. Be transparent. Integrity wins in the long run. And sometimes it does. But honesty isn't universally rewarded. In workplaces, being blunt can cost you politically. In relationships, radical transparency without tact can damage trust. In competitive environments, revealing too much can put you at a disadvantage. Social systems often reward diplomacy, framing, and strategic silence more than raw truth. There's also a difference between honesty and timing. Truth delivered carelessly can burn bridges. Truth delivered strategically can build credibility. The world doesn't always reward the most truthful person in the room. It often rewards the most tactful. That doesn't make honesty worthless. It makes it nuanced. Integrity still matters for long-term reputation and self-respect. Chronic dishonesty corrodes trust and eventually collapses credibility. But always be completely honest at all times isn't how most successful systems function. The more accurate lesson might be honest, but be wise about how, when, and with whom. Because truth without judgment can be as reckless as deception. Story 25. Taxes are a scam. They're robbing people. That feeling usually doesn't come from nowhere. When you watch a chunk of every paycheck disappear, then see potholes, bureaucracy, political waste, and programs you didn't vote for, it doesn't feel like a contribution. It feels like extraction. But taxes aren't inherently a scam. They're the mechanism modern states use to fund shared infrastructure. Roads, courts, public schools, emergency services, national defense, utilities regulation, air traffic control, sanitation systems, and countless invisible systems that keep society functioning. You don't individually contract for most of those services. They operate collectively. Where the anger usually lands isn't the concept of taxation itself. It's trust. Do funds get used efficiently? Are loopholes letting the wealthy pay proportionally less? Are you getting value for what you're paying? When people perceive imbalance, when billion-dollar corporations pay lower effective rates than wage earners, resentment spikes. Every functioning country taxes. The debate isn't whether taxes exist. It's how much, who pays, how it's structured, and whether the return feels fair. Taxes feel like robbery when accountability feels absent. They feel like an investment when transparency and results are visible. The emotion is often less about the deduction and more about the confidence in what happens after. Story 26. The government knows better. That phrase usually shows up when policies are defended with, trust the experts, or they have more information than you do. And sometimes institutions do have more data, more specialists, and more technical knowledge than the average person. Regulatory agencies, public health departments, and central banks aren't staffed by random amateurs. Expertise exists for a reason. But has expertise and always knows better aren't the same thing. Governments are made up of people with incentives, political pressures, budget constraints, blind spots, bureaucratic inertia. Policies can be shaped by lobbying, election cycles, ideology, or simple miscalculation. History is full of confidently implemented decisions that turned out to be wrong. The danger of the phrase isn't acknowledging expertise, it's surrendering judgment. Healthy societies balance institutional knowledge with accountability and skepticism. Experts can guide, data can inform, but infallibility isn't part of the deal. Blind trust is just as risky as blind rejection. The government can know more about certain things. It doesn't automatically know the best about everything. Authority and wisdom aren't synonyms. Story 27. Everyone is equal. It's one of the most repeated moral slogans in modern society, and it depends entirely on what equal means. Equal in worth? That's a philosophical position. Equal in dignity under the law? That's an ideal many systems strive toward. Equal in ability, intelligence, discipline, talent, drive, physical strength, resilience, opportunity, or starting position. That's not reality. People are born into wildly different circumstances, different genetics, different families, different neighborhoods, different economic conditions, different education systems, even different baseline health. Pretending those differences don't exist doesn't make society fairer. It just makes conversations less honest. Where the phrase becomes misleading is when it shifts from equal rights to equal outcomes or equal capacity. Humans vary dramatically in strengths, in weaknesses, in advantages, in disadvantage. The healthier framing might be, everyone deserves equal protection and basic rights. Not everyone begins at the same line. Equality of worth is a moral claim. Equality of condition has never been the human baseline. Confusing the two creates expectations reality can't sustain. Story 28. That overindulging in material possessions brings happiness. It's one of the most aggressively marketed ideas in modern life. New phone, new car, bigger house, better watch, limited edition drop, upgrade, upgrade, upgrade. Each purchase promises a small hit of excitement, a reset button, a glow up, a feeling of progress. And it works. For a moment, the brain gets a dopamine spike from novelty. Anticipation feels good. Unboxing feels good. Showing it off feels good. Then baseline returns. The item becomes normal. The satisfaction fades. The next thing starts calling. Psychologists call it hedonic adaptation. Humans rapidly adjust to improved circumstances. What once felt luxurious becomes standard. The emotional lift shrinks with repetition. Meanwhile, debt rises, storage fills, clutter increases, financial stress creeps in. The pursuit becomes a habit. This doesn't mean material comfort is meaningless. Security and stability absolutely matter. A safe home, reliable transportation, quality tools, those improve life. But excess accumulation doesn't scale happiness linearly. Experiences, relationships, health, autonomy, those correlate more strongly with long-term life satisfaction. Stuff can enhance life. It can't substitute for it. Buying more isn't the same thing as feeling fulfilled. And the checkout button isn't a cure for emptiness. Story 29. That the problem isn't you, it's them. It's empowering advice. Sometimes it's true. Toxic workplaces exist. Manipulative partners exist. Broken systems exist. You shouldn't automatically internalize every failure or conflict as a personal deficiency. But taken too far, that mindset becomes insulation. If every disagreement is because others are insecure, jealous, incompetent, or threatened, you never have to self-audit it. If every failed relationship was entirely the other person's fault, patterns go unexamined. If every career setback was pure politics, growth stalls. Growth requires friction. Sometimes the common denominator in repeated problems is environment. Sometimes it's you. The uncomfortable truth is that both can be true at once. You can be in a flawed system and still have blind spots. You can be mistreated and still contribute to dysfunction. Accountability and self-respect aren't opposites. Blaming yourself for everything is corrosive. Blaming others for everything is stagnation. The mature position sits in the middle. Discern what wasn't yours to carry and own what was. Because improvement only starts where responsibility does. Story 30. That blood-related means nothing else matters. That family automatically outranks behavior. That DNA overrides boundaries. That shared genetics excuses harm. It's one of the most emotionally loaded beliefs we're handed. Family can be powerful, supportive, protective, deeply loving. Those bonds can shape identity and belonging in ways nothing else does. But biology doesn't guarantee safety, respect, or compatibility. Some of the deepest wounds people carry come from relatives. Manipulation, neglect, favoritism, control, betrayal. Being related doesn't cancel those things out. And telling someone they owe unconditional loyalty simply because of shared blood can trap them in dynamics that damage their well-being. Healthy relationships are built on trust, reciprocity, and respect, not chromosomes. The chosen family exists for a reason. Friends, mentors, partners, people who show up consistently and treat you well often become stronger sources of support than biological relatives. Being related explains connection. It doesn't excuse harm. Family can matter deeply, but it isn't a free pass, and love isn't validated by DNA alone. Story 31. That police serve and protect. It's a slogan you see on patrol cars. It sounds reassuring, protective, civic-minded. In theory, law enforcement exists to maintain public safety, deter crime, and respond when something goes wrong. Many officers genuinely believe they're doing exactly that. But the phrase creates an expectation that isn't always reflected in reality. Policing institutions are structured around enforcing laws and maintaining order. That doesn't always align neatly with individual protection. Court rulings have established that police generally have a duty to enforce the law, not a specific legal obligation to protect any one person in every circumstance. Response times vary. Resources vary. Enforcement patterns vary by neighborhood. Trust levels vary dramatically depending on who you ask and where they live. For some communities, police presence feels protective. For others, it feels adversarial. The gap between the slogan and lived experience is where tension lives. Serve and protect is an aspiration. Whether it consistently functions that way depends on policy, accountability, training, incentives, and culture. The motto is simple. Reality is layered. Story 32. That good always wins in the end. That's a comforting narrative. It's also a story structure, not a law of nature. In movies and myths, patience and virtue are rewarded. Evil overreaches. Justice prevails. The arc bends toward moral resolution. Reality doesn't guarantee that arc. History shows that harmful systems can persist for decades, sometimes centuries, when they go unchallenged. Injustice doesn't dissolve on its own. Corruption doesn't self-correct out of shame. Power rarely relinquishes itself voluntarily. Change usually happens when people organize, confront, legislate, protest, compete, or dismantle harmful structure. It's active, not passive. It involves pressure, conflict, and risk. But there's a critical distinction. Opposing harm doesn't require becoming harm. Good wins by destroying evil can easily become justification for cruelty, dehumanization, or overreach in the name of righteousness. History also shows that movements claiming moral superiority can commit their own injustices if unchecked. The more grounded truth might be this: justice requires action. Passivity favors the status quo. But preserving what's good also requires restraint, accountability, and clarity about means, not just ends. There is no automatic moral gravity pulling history toward fairness. Progress happens when people choose to push for it, carefully, deliberately, and consistently. Story 33. Blood is thicker than water. It's usually said to mean family comes first, always, no matter what. The phrase gets used to guilt people into staying loyal, into tolerating behavior they wouldn't accept from anyone else, into prioritizing relatives over their own peace. But biology doesn't automatically create healthy bonds. Shared DNA doesn't guarantee respect, safety, or reciprocity. Some families are loving and supportive, others are controlling, manipulative, or emotionally harmful. Telling someone they owe unconditional loyalty because of genetics can trap them in dynamics that damage their mental health. Interestingly, the longer historical phrasing often cited is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb," implying that chosen bonds can be stronger than biological ones. Whether or not that origin is debated, the idea resonates for a reason. Connection built on trust and mutual care often runs deeper than connection built on ancestry alone. Family can be sacred, it can also be complicated. Loyalty is meaningful when it's earned and reciprocal, not when it's demanded by default. Blood explains relations. It doesn't automatically define obligation. Story 34. Mostly the brainwashing we all get from birth, to keep us passive and docile so we don't rebel against our owners. That feeling doesn't come out of nowhere. From childhood, we're taught routines: sit still, raise your hand, follow rules, don't disrupt, respect authority. School mirrors work, bells ring, schedules dictate movement, performance is graded. Later, jobs reinforce similar patterns: show up on time, meet expectations, don't question too loudly. It can absolutely feel like conditioning, but there's a difference between socialization and ownership. Every society trains children into its norms. Some of that is about coordination. You can't run large systems without shared rules. Roads need traffic laws, workplaces need structure, communities need basic cooperation. Not every rule is oppression, some are simply how complex groups function. That said, systems do shape behavior in ways that preserve stability. Economic dependence discourages risk. Debt reduces mobility. Social pressure dampens dissent. Media narratives influence perception. None of that requires a secret master. Incentives alone can produce conformity. The world isn't neatly divided into owners and owned, but power structures exist. Incentives shape behavior. Comfort and distraction can reduce rebellion. The key distinction is this: are you completely controlled, or are you navigating a structured environment with more agency than you're using? Recognizing influence is healthy. Assuming total ownership can quietly erase your own leverage. Story 35. Being in debt is normal and acceptable. That message is everywhere. Student loans are an investment in yourself. Car payments are just what adults do. Credit cards are building credit. At some point, owing money stopped feeling like a red flag and started feeling like a rite of passage. And to be fair, Not all debt is reckless. Some debt can increase opportunity. Education can raise earning potential. A mortgage can build equity. Business loans can fund growth. But normalization changes perception. When debt becomes standard, people stop questioning the structure that made it necessary. Why does education require decades of repayment? Why is healthcare financed? Why are wages stagnant while costs rise? When borrowing fills the gap between income and survival, debt shifts from tool to dependency. Interest compounds quietly, payments lock in future labor, risk increases, flexibility shrinks, debt can be strategic. It can also be a leash. The problem isn't that debt exists, it's that a system where most people must borrow just to participate gets labeled normal. Normal doesn't automatically mean healthy. Story 36. Skilled workers make a lot of money, and any economic problems unskilled workers face is their own fault. The real key to how much you make is how much of the value of your labor goes to you versus your boss. Without labor unions or any kind of labor movement, your boss decides how much of your labor goes to you, and they will take as much of that away from you as possible. Skilled jobs only pay a lot when there is a labor shortage, and if everyone decides to go for an in-demand skill set, there are more workers than jobs and salaries plummet. Story 37. That people are inherently good. It makes the world feel safer, predictable, manageable. If most people are good at their core, then harm is an exception, a glitch in the system. But human behavior isn't that simple. People are capable of empathy, sacrifice, generosity, and courage. They're also capable of cruelty, selfishness, and indifference, sometimes in the same week. Psychology and history both show that under certain pressures, fear, authority, groupthink, scarcity, ordinary people can justify harmful behavior surprisingly quickly. We're not born saints or villains. We're born with impulses, capacity for cooperation, capacity for competition, capacity for compassion, capacity for self-preservation. Environment, incentives, culture, and power shape which tendencies get reinforced. Believing people are inherently good can make you naive. Believing people are inherently bad can make you cynical. The more realistic view might be this: people are inherently capable of good, capable of harm. Which side shows up often depends on context, incentives, and accountability. Goodness isn't automatic. It's a choice, reinforced or discouraged by the systems around us. Story 38. Everyone should aspire to move up the company ranks. That idea is baked into career culture. Climb, promote, manage, lead, scale. If you're not moving up, you're falling behind. But upward mobility isn't automatically growth. Management requires a different skill set than execution. Some people are exceptional engineers, designers, analysts, nurses, or technicians, and have zero interest in performance reviews, budget approvals, or internal politics. Turning your best individual contributors into reluctant managers doesn't always benefit them or the company. There's also a lifestyle trade-off. Higher roles often mean longer hours, more stress, more visibility, and less technical autonomy. More meetings, more accountability for outcomes you don't directly control, more time managing people instead of doing the craft you actually enjoy. The assumption that up equals better ignores fulfillment. Some careers are more satisfying when deepened, not elevated. Mastery can be horizontal. Stability can be intentional. Not everyone measures success by title or org chart position. Ambition isn't one size fits all. For some people, leadership is energizing. For others, excellence without hierarchy is the goal. Climbing is optional, not mandatory. Story 39. Everything is under control. Governments say it during crises. CEOs say it during downturns. Institutions say it when systems wobble. It's meant to calm markets, calm voters, calm employees. But large systems are rarely fully under control. They're managed, adjusted, reacted to. Economies are influenced by millions of independent decisions. Supply chains depend on fragile coordination. Infrastructure ages, weather shifts, technology evolves faster than regulation. Human error never disappears. Unexpected variables show up constantly. Control at scale is more about damage mitigation than precision steering. There are contingency plans, risk models, emergency protocols, but complexity introduces unpredictability. That doesn't mean chaos rules everything. It means certainty is often overstated. Under control is usually shorthand for, we believe we can manage this. Not, we have eliminated risk. The comforting illusion is total command. The reality is ongoing adaptation. Systems don't stay stable because someone is omniscient. They stay stable because people keep adjusting when they aren't. Story 40. You still have privacy like you did 10 years ago. That one slipped by quietly. 10 years ago, most people weren't carrying always-on microphones in their pockets, wearing biometric trackers on their wrists, and voluntarily uploading their location, purchases, and conversations into cloud databases tied to advertising profiles. Now, your phone logs location data, apps track behavior patterns, search engines store queries, retailers build purchase histories, social media platforms map social graphs, data brokers aggregate it all. Even when you're not actively posting, metadata accumulates. Timestamps, IP addresses, device identifiers, movement patterns. It's not just governments, it's corporations, algorithms, third-party data marketplaces most people have never heard of. Surveillance doesn't feel like surveillance because it's frictionless, convenient, opt-in through long terms of service agreements no one reads. The trade is comfort for data. None of this means you have zero privacy, but the baseline shifted. The default is collection. The burden is on you to opt out. And even then, it's partial. Privacy didn't disappear overnight. It eroded quietly through convenience. And most people didn't notice until the ads started finishing their sentences. Story 41. That there were no good old days. People look backward with soft focus. They remember lower gas prices, tighter-knit neighborhoods, simpler tech, fewer notifications. What gets blurred out are the trade-offs. Higher crime rates in certain decades, widespread discrimination, lower medical survival rates, limited rights for women and minorities, higher workplace danger, environmental pollution that was simply normalized. Every era solves some problems and creates new ones. The past feels calmer partly because you weren't responsible for it yet. You were younger, your world was smaller, the stakes were lower. Nostalgia edits out the anxiety and keeps the highlights. Statistically, many things have improved over time. Global poverty rates, child mortality, technological access, medical treatments, legal protections. At the same time, new pressures emerged: digital overload, housing costs, polarization, climate risk. It's not that today is perfect, it's that yesterday wasn't either. The idea of a golden age often says more about memory than reality. Humans tend to remember feelings more than facts, and feelings, over time, soften. Every decade has its crises. We just romanticize the ones we survived. Story 42. The way money works. The sun is a nuclear furnace burning for free, but you're still twitching in a cubicle because you don't have enough imaginary tokens to justify your existence. Money isn't real. It's a psychotropic social lubricant, a linguistic virus that hijacked our survival instincts and convinced us that a ledger entry is more vital than the air in our lungs. We are living in a global hallucination maintained by sheer, frantic willpower and the terror of being the first one to stop pretending. We've offloaded our reality into the cloud, a place that doesn't exist, where digital ghosts dance in silicon jars. Your life's work is a string of ones and zeros stored on a server that could be wiped out by a solar flare or a disgruntled tech priest. Yet you'll bleed for those numbers. High-level bureaucrats perform ritualistic incantations called monetary policy, waving their hands to conjure trillions out of the void. But when you try to manifest a few extra bucks for bread, the laws of physics suddenly apply to you and you alone. It's infinite for the architects and scarce for the residents. We are born into a deficit. Before you can even speak, you owe the system for the privilege of occupying space on a planet you didn't ask to join. We aren't trading value, we're trading our finite time on Earth, the only thing that is real, for a conceptual placeholder that is being devalued by the second. Story 43. That AI is good for us. That's the headline. And in some ways, it's true. AI can accelerate research, assist in medical diagnostics, automate repetitive labor, increase accessibility for people with disabilities, and handle massive datasets faster than any human team. But the unease isn't irrational. When tools get smarter, humans can get lazier with certain skills. Calculators reduced mental arithmetic. GPS reduced spatial navigation ability. Search engines reduced memory recall for facts. There's evidence that when we offload cognitive tasks to technology, the brain adapts. It stops strengthening circuits it doesn't need as often. AI could amplify that effect. If writing, coding, researching, designing, and problem-solving are increasingly outsourced to systems, future generations might rely more on prompting than producing, more on verification than deep construction. That shift isn't inherently catastrophic, but it does change cognitive habits. The danger isn't intelligence disappearing. It's critical thinking weakening. Tools shape behavior. Behavior shapes brains. The question isn't whether AI is good or bad. It's whether we use it as augmentation or substitute. If AI becomes a crutch instead of a lever, mental atrophy becomes plausible. Technology doesn't automatically diminish humanity, but passive use of it might. Story 44. That once you figure life out, there's a level where the problems stop. Like you unlock stability, hit a certain income, find the right partner, land the dream job, buy the house, and then it's smooth sailing. That's the illusion. Problems don't disappear. They evolve. Early on, the problems are survival level: money, direction, identity. Later, they become responsibility level: maintenance, health, relationships, reputation, then eventually, legacy, aging, loss. The outfit changes, the tension doesn't. Even people who look like they've made it are juggling something: pressure to maintain status, fear of losing what they built, family strain, health issues, internal doubts. There isn't a plateau where life freezes in solved mode. There are seasons, some lighter, some are heavier, but the idea that one day you'll reach a problem-free tier is one of the quietest myths we carry. Maturity isn't eliminating problems. It's getting better at carrying them and realizing that peace isn't the absence of difficulty, it's stability within it. Story 45. That closure is something someone else gives you. We're taught that when something ends, a relationship, a friendship, a job, a chapter, you'll eventually get closure. A final conversation, an explanation, an apology, a clean ending that makes everything make sense. Most of the time, you don't. People ghost. They lie. They avoid it. They rewrite history. They move on without giving you the clarity you feel entitled to. And you're left replaying it in your head, waiting for the missing piece that never arrives. The lie is that peace depends on their explanation. It doesn't. Closure is often a decision, not an event. It's accepting that you may never fully understand someone else's motives. It's choosing to stop reopening the file. It's deciding that the lack of explanation is the explanation. Waiting for closure can trap you in someone else's silence. Creating it yourself is uncomfortable. But it's freedom, because not every story ends with a neat final paragraph. Sometimes you have to write it. Story 46. That we are each other's enemy. That the person next to you, different politics, different race, different income bracket, different beliefs, is the threat. It's one of the most effective narratives ever created, because when people are convinced the danger is horizontal, they stop looking vertically. Instead of questioning systems, incentives, power structures, or resource distribution, we argue with neighbors. We fight online. We pick sides. We reduce complex people into caricatures. The outrage becomes the focus. The structure fades into the background. Division is efficient. It keeps attention fragmented. It keeps energy misdirected. It turns collective frustration into interpersonal hostility. That doesn't mean disagreements are fake. People genuinely clash on values, priorities, and identity. Those conflicts are real, but framing fellow citizens as the primary enemy often obscures larger forces shaping the playing field. When people see each other first as adversaries, cooperation collapses. And when cooperation collapses, concentrated power faces less resistance. It's easier to manage a divided population than a unified one. The lie isn't that conflict exists. It's that the person beside you is always the real problem. Sometimes they are. Often they're just navigating the same system you are. Story 47. That you have unlimited time. We live like it's renewable. Put off the call. Delay the trip. Start the project next year. Fix the relationship later. Take the risk someday. Prioritize health when things calm down. There's always more time, right? That's the quiet assumption. But time isn't stored anywhere. It's not accruing in the background waiting to be claimed. It's being spent whether you're intentional or not. People delay hard conversations for years and lose the chance. They postpone dreams until responsibilities multiply. They assume friendships will still be there after enough "I've been busy." They treat their bodies like repairs can always be scheduled later. The biggest shock most adults experience isn't aging itself. It's acceleration. Years compress. Milestones blur. The gap between recently and a decade ago shrinks disturbingly fast. The lie isn't that you'll die tomorrow. It's that you'll definitely have the emotional, physical, and relational capacity later. You might. You might not. Time feels abundant in theory. In practice, it's the only non-renewable asset you actually own. Story 48. That you are what you produce. From early on, worth gets tied to output, grades, performance reviews, revenue, followers, titles, net worth. The question quietly becomes, what do you do, not who are you? Productivity becomes identity. If you're busy, you're valuable. If you're advancing, you're winning. If you slow down, you're falling behind. But humans aren't machines. You can lose a job, you can retire, you can burn out, you can get sick, you can step away. If your sense of worth is fused to productivity, any disruption feels like erasure. Economic systems reward output. That doesn't mean output equals value. Your capacity to work is one dimension of you, not the definition. The lie is subtle because it hides inside praise. Hard worker, high performer, top producer, all admirable. Just not the full measure of a person. You existed before you produced anything, and you'll still exist when you stop. Story 49. That you're behind. Behind in your career. Behind in money. Behind in love. Behind in life. There's this invisible race we're all supposedly running. Benchmarks float around. By this age, you should have X saved, Y accomplished, Z figured out. Social media makes it worse. You scroll past promotions, weddings, houses, babies, startups, six-pack transformations, and it feels like everyone else got the manual early. But there is no universal timeline. Some people peak early and plateau. Some wander for a decade and then lock in. Some change careers at 40. Some find love at 50. Some build wealth slowly. Some lose it and rebuild. Some never chase the same metrics at all. The behind feeling usually comes from comparison, not reality. You're comparing your internal, messy, non-linear process to someone else's curated highlight reel, or to a cultural script written for a different economy, a different era, a different personality type. Life isn't a standardized test. There's no master scoreboard. Different starting points, different constraints, different priorities. You're not behind. You're just on your own timeline. And most people quietly feel exactly the same way. Story 50. That happiness is a permanent state you're supposed to reach. Like there's a finish line where you finally arrive. Stable, fulfilled, unbothered, glowing. And if you're not consistently happy, you're doing something wrong. That's the lie. Happiness isn't a destination. It's a passing emotion. Just like sadness, just like anger, just like excitement. No one lives in a constant state of joy. Even people who seem to have it all cycle through stress, doubt, boredom, frustration. The human nervous system isn't designed for permanent euphoria. It's designed for adaptation. When you believe happiness is supposed to be your default setting, normal fluctuations start to feel like failure. A bad week feels like regression. A rough season feels like collapse. But contentment, meaning, and stability are more sustainable goals than nonstop happiness. Peace isn't constant pleasure. It's resilience through variation. The biggest relief comes when you realize you're not broken for not being ecstatic all the time. You're human, and humans oscillate.